So now that we've gotten good at solving one-step equations where we only had one operation that we had to undo, we're going to move on and look at two-step equations, and that's where we have two operations that we are going to undo. But before we get into it, let's look at some vocab. So we have equations. So equations have an equal symbol and expressions on both sides. Here's an example. 3x minus 4 equals 5. The 3x, the negative 4, and the 5 are terms because they're being added or subtracted. The negative 4 and the 5 are both constant terms because their value doesn't change, it stays constant. X is a variable because it has a value we don't know yet, or its value varies. And then 3 is called a coefficient because it's being multiplied to a variable. So 3x minus 4 is an expression. The solution to an equation is the value for the variable that makes the equation true. So when we're talking about equations, we can solve them, but if we don't have the equal sign, it doesn't make sense to solve an expression. So we can simplify expressions, but we can't solve them. It's kind of like winning a touchdown when you're playing baseball. So the strategy we're going to be using here is writing what are called equivalent equations. And that's when we take a big equation and we simplify it down so that way the simpler equation has the same solution as the big old long nasty one that we started with. Now we will be using addition, subtraction, and multiplication, division, whereas when we had one-step equations, we either used addition, subtraction, or multiplication, division. So here's an illustration of our plan for solving equations. So we have this box, and it's got the same number of dots on the left side and on the right side. And we want to figure out how many dots are in each of these envelopes here. So when we're trying to figure out how many are in each envelope, this pair of threes here doesn't really help us very much, so we can kind of set those off to the side. Now if we look, it's pretty easy to see that 5 dots go in each envelope there. So if we get rid of half, we end up with 5 in an envelope. Now we can model this illustration with an equation. So we have 2 envelopes. Now we're going to use x, our variable, for the number in each envelope because variables, we don't know yet what their value is. And we're adding these 2 envelopes, we're adding 3 more dots for the left side of the box. Now that's going to equal the right side of the box, which has 13 dots. So this picture here and this equation here are basically telling the same story. Here's another story that we can look at. If you're riding a bike 2 miles per hour, so 2 miles per hour, but you've already ridden 3, so you're going to add to the 2 miles per hour plus 3 more miles, and you're checking to see when the number of miles you've ridden equals 13 miles. So this equation summarizes this story that's going on up here, and these are the types of equations we're going to be solving. So let's get into some examples here. Now we have 3x plus 5 equals 11. Now when we solve this, we have x on the left, so if we're showing our work, we're also going to have x equals and then the value right there on our page. So we need to look on the left side of the equal sign, and we're going to ask ourselves what's being done to x. Well, in this case here, it's being multiplied by 3 and added by 5. So how do we undo multiply by 3 and add 5? Well, we're going to subtract 5 and divide by 3. So here we go. Start out by subtracting 5 to both sides. So we have 3x plus 5 minus 5. Plus 5 minus 5 is 0. So we're just left with 3x on the left. And then on the right-hand side, 11 minus 5 makes 6. So remember our addition subtraction property of equations, we can add or subtract the same value to both sides. Now we still need to go from 3x to x, so we need to undo a times 3 with a divide by 3 to both sides. 3 divided by 3 is 1x, written right there, and then 6 divided by 3 makes 2. So 2 is going to be the solution because it is the value for the variable that makes the equation true. So here we have negative 20 equals 4y minus 8. So we are solving this to find the value for the variable that makes the equation true. If we notice our variables on the right-hand side of the equal sign, it's the y there. So at the bottom of our scratch paper, we should have y equals and then our value there. Now, first question is, what is being done to our variable? Well, it's being multiplied by 4 and subtracted by 8. So we need to undo the multiply by 4 and the subtract 8. Well, how do we undo a minus 8? We're going to do that with a plus 8. Now we can do the same thing to both sides. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. So negative 20 plus 8, we have more negatives than we do positives. Think money. You owe 20 bucks. You only have 8, so you're still going to owe money. And then how much are you going to owe? Well, that's going to be 20 minus 8 makes 12. And then for the right-hand side, minus 8 plus 8 makes 0 because the minus and the plus undo each other, so we only have the 4y left. Next up, we need to go from 4y to y. This 4 is being multiplied by y, so we undo a multiply by 4 with a divide by 4 to both sides. So here we have negative 12 divided by 4. Negative divided by positive is going to be negative, and then 12 divided by 4 makes 3. So the value for the variable, the value for y that makes this equation true, the solution is negative 3. All right, for this equation here, 1/2 z plus 1/5 equals 4. There is a lot of fractions on here, but don't freak out, we'll go slow. So there's our equal sign there. We notice that we have the z, our variable, on the left-hand side. So when we're done showing our work, we're going to have z equals, then the value there. So the steps are going to be the same. We're looking at what is being done to our variable. Well, in this case here, it's being multiplied by 1/2 and added by 1/5. So we're going to undo multiply by 1/2 and add 1/5. So how do we undo add 1/5? With a subtract 1/5 to both sides. So the left side is 1/2 z plus 1/5 minus 1/5. Well, the plus 1/5 minus 1/5 just goes to 0. So we got 1/2 z plus 0 is just 1/2 z equals, now we got to do 4 minus 1/5. So we're going to change this 4 into a fraction, 4 over 1 minus 1/5. Now if you struggle with adding or subtracting these fractions, check out this video up here at the top. But here we go. We're going to multiply the diagonal, so that's going to be 4 times 5. And then it's going to be a minus, and then 1 times 1 is 1. So we're going to multiply the diagonals. 4 times 5 minus 1 times 1 is 20 minus 1 makes 19 for our numerator. And then for the denominator, multiply 1 times 5 makes 5. Now we're going to undo the 1/2 being multiplied by the z, because we want to go from 1/2 z to just plain old z. So we're going to divide 1/2 to both sides. Now, we don't normally divide by fractions. Instead, we multiply by reciprocal. So that's going to be multiplied by 2 over 1 to both sides. So this is the way it looks. So 2 over 1 times 1/2 just makes 1. That's a 2 over 2 makes 1. Z written right there. And then for multiplying over here, that's going to be 19 times 2 is 38. 5 times 1 is just 5. And there's the value for the variable that makes the equation true. 38 over 5 is the solution. So just remember, when we're solving these two-step equations, we have two different operations that need to be undone. So we're asking ourselves what's being done to the variable, and then how do I undo those operations? Generally speaking, we're first going to undo the addition or subtraction, and then we're going to undo the multiplication or division. Now, there are some equations that have a different order, but that's not in this video here.